Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Sunday morning Parsha class, the Parsha of Teruma. Good to see you all. Good morning. Start with Alachaim on our coffee. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyah b'dvarei. Nothing like a good coffee. Like Jerry Seinfeld says, there's nothing more important in the world than coffee. Before a person dies, you know what the last words he usually says? My life, wasn't too good, but the coffee was good. Okay, Parsha of Teruma. We missed last week. I apologize. We were in Houston for a bris. Thank God for happy occasions. And we're also going to be away next week. Before I forget to tell you at the end of the class, next week we're also going to be away for a wedding in Toronto. Yes, you heard me right. A wedding in Toronto. Why Toronto? Don't ask too many questions, but that's where it is. So we'll be away. Who flying? What flying?
Can Hayamushka go with you?
Hayamushka and the kids.
All right.
Package deal. I told the family, if you want me to come, you got to.
Yeah, good for you.
You come as a group. Okay. So next week we'll take off from we should still study the Parsha, of course, but we're not going to be studying together for Sunday morning. But either way, so what we missed last week is the Parsha of Mishpatim, which basically is a continuation to the giving of the Torah that we had 2 weeks ago, the Parsha of Yisro. After the giving of the Torah, we have the laws, right? So we have a Parsha that kind of goes through many laws, mostly civil laws, which even our civil laws come from the Torah, from God. And towards the end of the Parsha, we had a little bit about, going back towards the beginning of the part of the preparation before giving of the Torah. And now we are in this week's Parsha, the Parsha of Teruma, which talks about something that happened after the giving of the Torah, the idea of building a mishkan, building what's called a tabernacle, building what we see as like a home, a space in this physical world for God's presence. God is, of course, everywhere, omnipresent, but there are certain spaces where God is more felt, or as we say, more revealed. His presence is felt. So, for example, you go into a synagogue, right? We understand that although God is everywhere, but there's a certain higher presence, a certain respect that we have in a synagogue more than anywhere else. Not because God is not anywhere else, but because God is more felt in a holy place, a place like a synagogue, a place like the Western Wall, a place that is seen as a holy place. God is there, revealed there more. And the same is true with this Mishkan, and later in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple in Jerusalem, where God says, this is my home. Just like a home, right? Ourselves, we know that we may find ourselves in various places, in various situations, and we kind of adapt to our surroundings, right? So how do we work? How do we act in the workplace? Appropriate for the workplace, with the way, whatever socially accepted in that environment, the way we dress, the way we speak, the things that we do, things that we refrain from doing, because we are adapting to that environment. How is a person acting when they're in their own home? Much different, right? They're much more loose. They're kind of just dressing the way they want to dress. They are eating the things that they want to eat. They are doing or not doing the things that they enjoy or don't enjoy. So if I want to learn about the person, who is this person? I want to understand them, their true personality, their true character traits, their true identity. The more I get to know them in their home, or at least I'm a fly on the wall in their home, that's the way I can see who they truly are. So in a person's home, their true self is more apparent and more revealed. So it's true when we say that we want that there should be a home for God, a place where God is revealed in this world, that is the idea of a home. A home is a place where godliness is much more himself. God is more himself. He's more revealed. His true identity is more revealed, more felt in this world. And that is the idea of building this Mishkan. Now, the Mishkan was, there's various opinions whether the Mishkan was a direct result of the sin of the golden calf, which we have not read yet about. We will read about this in 2 weeks. We read about the sin of the golden calf that happened 40 days after the receiving of the Torah. Or perhaps the commandment, the instruction to build this Mishkan was already preceded the sin. But regardless, the building of the Mishkan definitely happened after the sin. In fact, it happened, Moshe only relayed this mitzvah to the Jewish people after Yom Kippur, when Moshe was on the mountain, as we know, for three. We always say Moshe was on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights, right? But the truth is, he was really on the mountain for 120 days because it was 3 sets of 40 days and 40 nights. So if you do the math, he went up on Shavuos on the 6th of Sivan, which is the day of receiving of the Torah. He came down for the 3rd time on Yom Kippur. And Yom Kippur is the day after Yom Kippur is when Moshe tells the Jewish people of this instruction to build the Mishkan. But whether it's out of chronological order or not, but here is where we have the instruction that God gives Moshe to tell the Jewish people about the building of the Mishkan. Now, like every organization, like every synagogue, in order for it to go up, what do you got to do? You got to fundraise. You got to fundraise. You got to put on your fundraising hats, and you got to raise the funds. You got to go out there and you got to work hard. But for Moshe had it easy. Moshe had it easy. It says that he went out to collect the funds, and he got too much. First and last time in history that they raised too much money. And Moshe says, "Stop. We have enough. We have enough." It's every rabbi's dream. So the Parsha opens up with Hashem telling Moshe about these gifts that he needs for this Mishkan. And he lists 13 items. 13 items that we need for the Mishkan. Just to kind of give you a bird's view of this Mishkan, people like me who always have to, need visuals. If you jump to page 531, you have like a bird's view of the courtyard of the Mishkan with its covers. So this was a traveling Mishkan, which means that it was very easily taken apart, and then they would travel with it, and they would really erect it. It would take them maybe an hour or two, a short while to take it down to put it back up. You have the courtyard, which was 100 cubits, which is a biblical measurement, which let's say it's roughly about 1.5 feet per cubit. So let's say about 150 feet by 75 feet, give or take.
Half a foot.
I'm sorry?
Half a foot.
Right. And then you have the Mishkan itself, the tabernacle, which was covered with these materials, 3 layers, very colorful. And then inside of it, there were basically 2 chambers, 2 rooms inside of it. You had, I think, about 2/3 of that space was the room where they had the altar that they had the insects on, and they have the table with the showbread, and you have the menorah that was lit every day in the Mishkan. That was in one room, and in the other room, which we call the Holy of Holies, Kodesh HaKadoshim, you had the Ark in that room, and that was the room that only Aaron walked in once a year, as we know. That was basically the entire Mishkan. Those 2 chambers, 2 rooms inside of this Mishkan, and then there was this big courtyard that had the larger altar that they had all the other sacrifices being brought on. And this was a traveling Mishkan. Later in the temple, in the Beis Hamikdash in Jerusalem, they had a lot more, larger building and more rooms, etc. But this was the Mishkan. Yeah, question?
Well, When did they tear it down and rebuild it? I mean, I know there wasn't a set amount of time they'd be in one quarter and move on.
So every time they traveled, how many times they traveled? They traveled about 42 times. So over 40 years, 42 times. Now you may say, oh, it's about once a year. It wasn't about once a year because I think the Rashi says, if I remember correctly, that 28, I think that's the number, 28 of the 40 years, they just traveled a handful of times. So the beginning, they traveled quite a bit. Towards the end, the last like year or two, they traveled quite a bit. But for most of the 40 years, they could have been a number of years in one place. So sometimes they would, in one day they would travel and camp for a day, and then the next day leave already. And some places they would stay for a number of years. So no telling. Okay, so let's read inside a little bit. The beginning of chapter 25, Parsha of Teruma, page 510, 511 in the Gutnik Chumash. Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe Leimer. God speaks to Moshe. What does he say? Daber b'nei Yisrael. Speak to the children of Israel. V'yikchu li Teruma, and they shall take for me Teruma, which is an interesting way of saying to give Teruma, to give the donation. It says to take the donation. It's almost like what you own is not really yours. You're taking from God's and giving it to God. Okay. Me'ez kol isha sheyidvenu liboy, from every person who has inspires his heart is inspired to give tikhu as you should take my donation. So right over here, Rashi points out that you'll notice the word Teruma is being repeated here time and again. In fact, we say the word Teruma 3 times. And the reason why we say it 3 times because it's actually hinting to the 3 different types of donations, Teruma, that were being given at the time. 2 of them was a set of amount per person. It was a half a shekel. We come to know the half a shekel because later it's repeated later, the idea, or it's really mentioned later, where each person had to give a half a shekel for an atonement for their soul, for the sin of the golden calf. And we actually continue this until today, remembering the idea of the half a shekel, where around Purim time, if the night of Purim, the custom is, but if you don't do the night of Purim, you can do the day of Purim, where till today people give 3 half coins, half a dollar, half a shekel in Israel, whatever currency you're giving, 3 half coins to remember the half shekel that they would give back in the day. What does the half a shekel go to? So the half a shekel, there were two half shekel donations that were given. One of them was given for the sockets, the silver sockets that were used as a foundation for the beams, for the walls of the Mishkan. So that was like a one-time donation, a half a shekel per person. And then there was another half a shekel that was given, and this was annual. Every year they would give a half a shekel for the fund. It wasn't for the Kiddush fund, but it was for the general fund, for the ongoing offerings and other expenses that were done that were needed for the service of the temple. So that was an annual donation that lasted well over for hundreds of years, going into the time when the Jewish people were in Israel, where every year around before Pesach, around that's when everyone would give a half a shekel per person. It was a set amount per person to cover the various expenses of the services, the offerings, the sacrifices that were brought in the temple. That was a half a shekel. But this week's Parsha, we really elaborate on the other types of donations, and that was the one-time donations that were given to actually build a Mishkan, right? So they needed, as you see inside, you needed gold, silver, copper, and we'll read the 13 items that were needed for the Mishkan, and that was something that they all gave at the time. So verse 3, these are the types of contributions that you should collect from them. Zahav, kesef, nechoshes. We need gold, silver, copper. And Rashi says, if you look, if you study all, the building of the temple and all the Mishkan and all the artifacts that were needed, you see that all these materials were used in one way or another in the building of the Mishkan. Usecheles v'argamon v'sela ashani v'sheish v'izim, turquoise, purple, then crimson wool, linen and goat's hair. V'oires elim ma'adamim v'oires chashim. We needed ram skins dyed red, and tachash skins. Tachash was a certain type of animal that had colorful skins. Rashi says that it was an animal that was just there for the Mishkan. It was extinct afterwards. And atse shitim and acacia wood. We're going to get back to that in a moment. Verse 6, shemen lamor. We needed oil for the lamp, for the light, for the eternal lamp. V'samim l'shemen hamishcha, spices for the anointing oil. V'likteres hasamim, and for the incense fumes. Avnei shoham v'avnei miluyim. We need shoham stones and the filling stones for la'ephod v'lachoshen, for the apron and for the breastplate, which we know they had many stones on the breastplate and on the shoulders of the ephod. And then, of course, we have the famous verse, "V'asu li migdash v'shachanti b'seicham." You shall make for me a sanctuary, and I will dwell among them. Which we know, we point out that we don't say I will dwell in it, but I say I will dwell among them, because ultimately a Mishkan was, in addition to the actual physical building or temple or Mishkan, that was tabernacle that was actually built, but the idea of the Mishkan is really within each and every one of us. We build a little Mishkan within our own hearts. Exactly how I am showing you exactly how everything should be built. This is how you shall build it. Okay, I want to go back to this verse that talks about the wood, the acacia wood, the cedar wood. The commentaries have a lot of fun with this verse, because all other materials that were needed for the Mishkan was something that they had with them. We know that the Jewish people left Egypt, they were very wealthy. They basically emptied Egypt of their wealth. And then we know that after the splitting of the sea, where the sea spit out all the Egyptians and their horses, all their wealth with them, and they were able to collect everything that they needed. So the Jewish people were very wealthy. They were very wealthy. And so they had a lot. So they were able to come up with all this material. But wood, where do they have wood? Where do they have wood from? Especially, they needed some, beams of wood. That's not just, some twigs or some small branches to make these. The height of the Mishkan was 15 feet. 10 amos, which is 10 cubits, 15 feet roughly. I mean, a 15-foot beam. I don't know. This beam is that 15. I think this is around 15 feet, right? I think it's a 16-foot ceiling over here.
3 times what?
So, no, 15 feet.
I'm saying there's 45 to get there. 15 is even a little more.
Not 50, 15.
Oh, 15.
1.5. The height. The height was 1.5.
Okay, I'm sorry.
But I'm saying even a 15-foot you need trees. I mean, this is not like a little branch. It's not a little bush, right? Where do they have these acacia wood? And if you go down to the Sinai Desert today, I've not been there, even though I'd love to be there one day, but I'm told that it's a desert. You don't got trees there. The only trees that they have there, they have these small bushes. They have some bushes, like, for shade, but nothing that has trunks of 15 feet or more. So where do they get these trees from? So simply put, you could say they went out and bought them. I mean, you're in the desert; it's not that far from other cities. You could go out and buy them, or perhaps you're thinking about two. We said about 2 million people roaming the desert. You could imagine that there were people coming from nearby towns and cities, coming and selling things, right? They're probably coming and, hey, we have some goods, we have some fruit, we have whatever, right? People were selling things. Maybe they sold them wood. But what's interesting, if you turn for a second to page 587, later, when we talk again about how they actually built this Mishkan, we have a very interesting expression referring to this acacia wood. Over here in chapter 35, verse 24, we have the verse reads as follows. Everyone who set aside a donation of silver or copper brought a donation for God. Everyone who had acacia wood for all the work that needed to be done brought it. There are certain things that people brought, but then there are certain things that people had with them. So whoever had this wood with them brought it. I mean, it doesn't say that people went out and got it, or people went and they brought. It sounded like, yeah, I had it with me. Yeah, so I have some gold with me, some silver, I have some wool. I also have some these, large beams of wood with me. Like, why would people have it with them? Like they're roaming the desert. I mean, like you left Egypt. Like, is that what's on your mind? Let's take the wood, right? What's the idea of this wood, and how do they have it with them? So Rashi says something fascinating. And I see Rashi here is translated on page 511. Rashi says, and he quotes from a midrash, and uncharacteristically, he actually quotes the name of the sage, the rabbi who taught this teaching. He says, Rabbi Tanchuma explained that Yaakov Avinu saw prophetically that the Jewish people were destined to build a tabernacle in the desert. So he brought acacia trees to Egypt and planted them. He commanded his children to take the trees with them when they left Egypt. Wow. What's he saying? And remember, Rashi generally likes to follow the most literal understanding of the Torah. Rashi doesn't just throw out midrashic ideas or esoteric ideas unless he feels that this is the most literal understanding of or the only way to understand the literal meaning of the verse. So Rashi here is telling us that what happened? They didn't buy it from any businessman coming by. They didn't find it, they didn't find the forest suddenly of acacia wood. It wasn't a miraculous thing. Some commentators say, oh, it's a miraculous thing. Suddenly, around Mount Sinai, these big trees just sprung up. No, Rashi says that's not what happened. You know what Rashi says? This goes back many, many years. Over 210 years. When Jacob finds out that his son Joseph is in Egypt, and he's so excited, we got to go down to Egypt, we got to visit and reunite ourselves with Joseph. And of course, he packs his belongings. I mean, how many things is he packing? You can only imagine. All he has in mind is, I'm going to see Joseph. It's been so many years. I think, we're seeing these videos over the last few weeks of the hostages being reunited with their parents, with their family, right? They're not thinking about anything else. They just want to be there with their child. They haven't seen them for 500 days. And yesterday we saw 10 years. We haven't seen them for 10 years. That's all we're thinking about, just to give that hug and reunite with our children. Jacob didn't see his son for, I believe, 22 years. A long time. He's taking his family, 70, right? 67, whatever. They're coming down to Egypt. Rashi says, besides the bare minimum that he was bringing with him, whatever possessions he was able to take with him while he traveled, you know what else he brought? He brought these little saplings, these little bushes or seeds, I don't say exactly what it was, of these trees. And he says, I'm going to plant them in Egypt. I'm going to plant them in Egypt. This is what he was thinking about. He had the prophecy. He knew that one day the Jewish people are going to be in a desert where they're not going to have these trees. And they're going to need the trees. So he has to plant this forest of acacia wood. And he told his children before he died, so you see these trees. It wasn't for naught. It wasn't just, hey, I wanted to have, I wanted my garden. I wanted these trees. I love these trees from Israel. I had to have my trees in Egypt. It wasn't just that. It was specifically because you're going to need it one day. And when you leave Egypt one day, when you leave Egypt, don't just take your belongings, make sure you take these trees with you and schlep it with you. You know, these heavy, heavy beams. It's not going to be easy, but do it. You're going to need it. You're not going to regret it. Take it out with you. Okay? And that's what happened. Rashi says that when the Jewish people left Egypt, they didn't know yet about this Mishkan business. They didn't know exactly what to need it for, but they knew that Zadie, Jacob told us that we got to take these trees out with us. And that's what they did. They took out these trees, these big logs. Right? If you ever see any pictures of illustrating the Exodus of Egypt, I don't know if the movie knew about this detail. They didn't add this in. Not just were they coming with their camels and with their donkeys and with their sheep and with the goats and their families taking their belongings out. Evidently, there were also some people who were carrying these logs of wood, taking it with them. When splitting of the sea, it came with them. They camped around the Mount Sinai, it came with them. And now finally they get this instruction from God. Oh, we need these woods for the Mishkan. And now they're like, oh, now we know. We know what it's for. We knew that it was something for the desert. We didn't know exactly what. Oh, now we know what it's for. This is what Rashi says. We know Rashi doesn't just give us these nice midrashic explanations. There's a reason why Rashi says that this was so important. And what's interesting also is that Rashi doesn't always or generally does not mention the name of the person who taught this teaching. He often mentions explanations from the Talmud, from the Gemara, from the Midrash, without a name. But here Rashi says the name of the person, Rabbi Tanchuma. Which Tanchuma, the name Tanchuma has a meaning. I'm trying to think of another Hebrew word. Have you ever heard the expression Nichum Avelim? Nichum means to comfort. In fact, the name Menachem comes from the same etymology of Tanchuma, to comfort. Tanchuma means to comfort. And what Rashi is saying over here is that this whole idea of this acacia wood, and the question is obviously also like, why does God even need this specific type of wood? He couldn't manage with a different type of material. It was all planned. God wanted them to use this wood because he wanted Jacob to know about it in order that he should bring it down to Egypt, that they should have it with them all along the time that they were in Egypt. Because this will bring tanchuma, this will bring comfort to the Jewish people. Imagine what the Jewish people were going through while they were in Egypt. And they hear, some people are saying, you know what our great-grandfather told us before he died? He told us we're going to leave Egypt. Right? And some people are like, what? You believe in that stuff? It's been so many years. It's a fairy tale. Egypt is Egypt, right? There's no way we're leaving Egypt. What are you talking about, right? You know what they would say? They would say, but look at these trees. Look at these trees. These trees were planted. They're not natural. They're not naturally. What's the word? They're not native to. Right to the Egypt. They came from Israel. Jacob specifically brought it here because one day we're going to be leaving Egypt. Seeing this tangible, that this visual, yes, these are the trees that we are going to take with us. That gave us gave them the strength and what they needed, the extra push, what they needed to believe that yes, this is real. This is real. It's really going to happen, right? It's not just a faith-based idea. Like, yeah, I believe my parents, and my parents told me that their parents told them, that there was this Joseph, there was this Jacob, there was the tribes. We heard the stories that we're going to leave Egypt one day. No. Look, we see it. We see it. It makes it so much more real. It brought comfort to Tanchuma. It brought comfort to the Jewish people. And this was all planned out. This is why Hashem wanted specifically this type of wood, because he wanted them to need Jacob to bring it down. And they should see this wood growing in Egypt all this time, knowing that one day they're going to leave. A number of years ago, I was invited to come to go to Washington for a celebration of the Rebbe's life. It was like a week before Pesach. It was a very busy time, but they wanted they had representatives from all states, and they needed a representative from Louisiana, and no one else was able to go. So last on the list was Rabbi Seitlin, so they called me. I'm able to come to represent Louisiana at this breakfast. It was a full day. It was a one-day thing. So fine. So I come to Washington, and we had a breakfast with the various elected officials and senators and congressmen, whatever, and we had this event. We're walking from place to place, and then one of the times I was walking out of I think it was right next to the Capitol, and then I see a guy who's standing, just like very humbly, nonchalantly, like on the side of the road, leaning on a pole. And I look at him, I'm like, wait, I recognize this guy. Then I realize he is Nathan Sharansky.
Yeah, wow.
I'm like, well, he was a guest speaker for the evening, event, which I didn't stay for. I had to leave before that. But Nathan Sharansky, many of you may have heard of him. He was a refusnik in Russia, and eventually he got out and he came to Israel. He got involved in politics. He was a Knesset member, I believe, and he was an active till today, I believe, an activist in Israel. But he tells over his story when he was in Russia, where he was not religious, obviously Jewish. He did not read any Hebrew, and but he wanted to leave Russia, communist Russia, and go to Israel. His wife, I believe, named Avital, got a visa for herself, and he was waiting for his visa. But the visa had an expiration date. His wife's visa, Avital, had an expiration date. So basically, the day was coming, and he didn't get his visa yet. But getting a visa, Avital wasn't going to, just not use her visa because they don't tell me what will be after that. So they decided that they'll get married, and then hopefully soon after that he'll get his visa and he'll be able to leave and join her in Israel. So they got married a day before her visa was expired. They get married in Russia. The next day, Avital hops on a plane and leaves Russia, goes to Israel, and he continued with all his applications and trying to get his visa, but he's denied. He becomes this big refusnik, and before he knows it, he's sitting behind bars. He's arrested. He's sitting in prison, and he sat in prison for years. While he was in prison, he got a gift from his wife, a small pocket-sized Tehillim, Book of Psalms, a Tehillim. He knew it's something special. He'd heard of Tehillim before, but he wasn't able to read it. It was only in Hebrew. It wasn't a translated version. It wasn't in Russian or English or any other language. It was a Hebrew Tehillim. He knew it's something special, but he couldn't read it. But he would spend the time just flipping through the pages. And he's a smart man. So he would try to teach himself how to read and how to understand it. And he spent hours and hours just looking at these pages, and he's trying to find at least one verse, one psalm that he's able to understand and kind of get what the meaning is. And I don't remember how long it took him, but eventually he got a verse. The verse was, Gam ki elech begates halmaves, loy irara ki atemadi. Even when I will walk in the shadow of death, I will not fear because God is always with me. Somehow, this was the first verse that he was able to figure out the meaning of it. And once he figured it out, he realized, what a message. In the darkest place, he's sitting behind in a Russian prison, away from his wife, doesn't know what's going to be his future. And he gets this little Tehillim. And this is the first verse that talks to him, that even when you're in the worst situation, in the darkest situation, God is with you. So that Tehillim, that book he cherished it so much, it became so important to him, that he literally, till today, he does not leave anywhere without it. It's in his inside, suit pocket, pants pocket, wherever. He does not leave anywhere without it, because this is like what he holds on to for the courage, for the hope, for strength, for everything that he needs. It's something that he knows in his head. He has belief in God, but having something tangible that he can hold on to makes it so much more real. And thinking of that story when reading this Rashi, where you could believe in what our parents are telling us. We could believe that God will take us out one day. We could believe that's going to be better. We could believe that there's light at the end of the tunnel. But having something more physical to look at, to see, to touch, to feel, in which this physical item is crying, screaming out, there is hope. There is light at the end of the tunnel. There will be, the sun will rise tomorrow. There's going to be a good future. The end will be good. That gave them the hope. That brought them the Tanchuma, having those trees, be able to see. And of course, in our lives as well, when we're going through something difficult, to have that with us, something that we could see and we could realize that this is something so real, definitely helps. So that is a little bit of the explanation to why Hashem specifically wanted this type of wood, and how Yaakov and Rashi goes with this interpretation. That Yaakov brought it down specifically all the way, years earlier, for the Jewish people to have that visual while going through the difficult moments in Egypt, and that obviously helped them with their faith. So I'll leave you with that. Thank you for joining us this Sunday morning, and I'll have a good week. I just want to mention again.